Today, we have a very special Christmas episode of the Open Source Security Podcast. I've got Daniel Thompson returning. He's the CEO of Crab Nebula, export rapporteur at Etsy, security theater actor, and the guy behind Complyland. So I asked Daniel to come back because Daniel is the smartest person I know when it comes to CRA. And I thought, wouldn't it be hilarious to ask the question, can or is Santa CRA compliant? So Daniel, thank you so much for agreeing to this ridiculous topic.
Yeah, of course. No, I think the most important thing to remember is that Santa operates on a very strict schedule, as does the Cyber Resilience Act. So, as you may be aware, the very first parts of the Cyber Resilience Act that are entering application are going to be in June of 2026. That is when the governments have to, or have the ability to, notify a conformity assessment body to the commission as a body capable of certifying the conformity to the standards. Then the next episode, as it were, is going to be in September of 26. That is when the vulnerability disclosure, the reporting mechanisms are in place, and everyone has to tell if they've been naughty or nice. So I guess the first point in time where Santa could be compliant is going to be for the Christmas season of 26. However, he doesn't have to have full compliance for all of his products with digital elements, because those are actually going to be probably based on Module H, although some people say it's a default class of product. If it were me, I would have put Santa and all of Santa's stuff at critical 2. I know there isn't critical 2. You're saying, Daniel, funny. No, but really, seriously, gifts are important because we have to deal with not just safety, but also security. And I mean, I think it's NORAD. You know NORAD. They're tracking him, so it's also about defense, right? Now, the first theoretical part of Santa's compliance, like I said, is going to start in September. However, smart Santa followers know that he's well prepared. So he obviously has his chosen conformity assessment bodies, and like I said before, he's probably taking the Module H path. So if he's doing it right, he also has an ISO 9001 set up and ready to go to be expanded upon to track his quality management system. Obviously, there's a quality management system. I have never had a present from Santa with someone else's name on it. It just doesn't happen. So he's very much into the QMS side of the things. So that's why I'm saying it's probably Module H, in which case he will then drop his Module H certification the day the standard relevant to his product is published, the vertical standards. Operating systems is my guess, is what he'll certify against, just because there has to be a machinery behind that. It's like there's IT, there's OT, and there's ST. Frickin' Santa, right? Santa tech. I don't know how it works. Nobody does, but that's probably what he'll do, in which case he will be compliant with the expectations of Module H, this quality management approach, well ahead of time, probably even before anyone else, so 26 is my bet.
Holy cow, that was a fire hose of information. I will say you've taken a level of seriousness to that question much above what I expected. So well done, sir.
Look, I'm a serious guy. I work with serious people. And one of the things I've learned writing standards is that they don't mean anything if we're wishy-washy about it, right? Like, words have meaning. Meaning is important. We agree on these definitions. And that's actually the latest news from Commission Land, from COM, is they recently published the final definitions of the products with digital elements that are important and critical, which is great. I mean, as an author of a standard that is based upon the meaning of this term, it's good to have in my pocket before we send these standards out over to HAS assessment at the commission. So, like, butter.
So, I mean, what is it like? What is the definition of critical in that context, right? Like, what kind of products are we talking about that are going to fall under this jurisdiction?
Well, thankfully, I wrote a book about this. Humble pitch. And in the book, you can find the previous version of the definitions of products with digital elements, the one that we got in July. And like I said, there's important class 1, important class 2, and critical. Now, critical, that's what you asked about. Hardware devices with security boxes. I'm thinking that's the gift box with the ribbon on it, right? You know, that's why I think it's probably critical, Santa's gets. Or smart meter gateways within smart metering systems and other devices for advanced security purposes, including for secure crypto processing.
Okay, so I don't think Santa's delivering smart meters, hopefully.
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm like asking myself serious questions about my life choices at that point.
I mean, I won't count anything out. But so when we think of an entity like Santa Claus, right, we're talking about a lot of consumer stuff, right? Where does like consumer stuff fall in this universe?
So there is a classification of importance that talks about children's. Oh, wait, let me just read it. Internet connected toys that have social interactive features or that have location tracking features.
Which is a lot
That's
of stuff.
an important class. Smart home products with security functionalities, including smart door lock, security camera, baby monitoring systems, and alarm systems. Right? Personable wearables that have a health monitoring purpose, or personable wearables intended for the use by and for children.
Ah, okay.
Right.
And
That's a special call out there.
And they have to follow the CRA, I guess, guidelines, right?
Well, for each of these named verticals in the important and critical classes, there is a harmonized standard written by the fine folks at CENELEC, or ETSI, the European Standardization Organizations. And by fine folks, what I mean explicitly are a group surrounding a rapporteur, which is kind of like a subject matter expert meets a secretary, meets a comment wrangler, meets someone with not enough time. And they work together with titans of industry. So I have 3 that our company is working on, browsers, password managers, and boot managers. And for example, at the browser manager meetings, which happen lately on a weekly basis, they're 2 hours long. You have to be an Etsy member to join, but thankfully, Mozilla is an Etsy member, Google is an Etsy member, Huawei is an Etsy member, Apple's an Etsy member, although Apple doesn't show up as much as we'd like them to. And if Apple, you're listening, I'll say hi again. Please come and talk to us. We'd like to know what you think the difference is between WK WebKit and Safari. And I mean, I'm not going to go too deep into browsers right now. Maybe we can do that in a little bit. But basically, all of these verticals try to support manufacturers in attaining what is called the presumption of conformity. What this means is, if you as a manufacturer have a product that has an explicit use case, the goal of this product is to be a VPN. That's what it's for. Then you have a vertical standard that describes the risks associated with VPN. We're writing risk-based standards, and there are a number of definable CIA triad explained concerns that the regulator has expressed that all products have to address. And if you as a manufacturer choose, you don't have to, but if you choose to use a harmonized standard, then there's a very clear set of expectations based on use case or environment or threat model that you then can pick and choose the requirements that mitigate those risks and assess your mitigation with tests, collect that evidence, and that is how you prove that you have fulfilled the expectations of the commission to um, be conformant with the law. Now, like I said, you can choose because you can also go to DECRA or to TÜV or to any other conformity assessment body and say, hey, I don't like this standard. Let's do it my way. And, the conformity assessment body is a legal entity. Ultimately, it's like a lawyer. So they can't break the law for you. They're going to have to work hard and even harder than using one of the harmonized standards. So the standards aren't required. What is required is that you prove your conformity, and the standards give you a way to assess that you have done the right things based on the expectations of the commission and nothing else. That was a lot. Maybe you have a couple questions.
No, that I did not know this. I'm learning way more from this episode than I thought I would, which is a delight. Okay, so I want to back up to the beginning of what you said. And you said in order to work with the regulators, you need to be a European. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. I mean, every manufacturer of a product that places that product on the European single market is going to have to follow the laws of Europe.
Right.
So the direct contact with the regulator, you better hope not, right? Like, you fulfill your obligations by declaring conformity. I think the thing that everyone recognizes out there is the CE mark. Have you seen that little letter, like the C like a half circle and the
Yep.
E like a half circle? That shows that the manufacturer has declared conformity. In some cases, for some products, they have to use a notified body, which is an authorized entity that verifies this, right? And once you have declared this conformity, you keep this documentation around, and if the regulator has to ask you for the documentation, that's a big red flag for you because something's going wrong somewhere. Now, a reasoned request from any market surveillance authority means you supply them with a bunch of documentation. Now, there's public documentation, like the user manual, translated into all of the languages of Europe where the product is on the market. This is mostly formalia. It's like, this is a product to take pictures with your smartphone. You install it by downloading it from the App Store. You update it automatically when the App Store tells you there's an update, and it will do it for you. If you choose to do it manually, you have to click this setting here. It is not recommended to do that, but it's free world, right? Turning off automatic updates might disqualify you from litigation opportunities according to the Product Liability Directive. So that's the user manual. Then you have to have one of your favorite things in the world, a software bill of materials. This is hotly contested. What it's actually ultimately going to consist of, we'll see. But I want to remind all of your readers out there, even if the commission only demands top-level dependencies in your massively oversized NPM infiltrated dependency tree, it's okay to keep it all there, because who's going to be looking at this? Your engineers, perhaps a conformity assessment body, but definitely the market surveillance authority. And if they have to pick apart a binary to find out which version of which corrupted module you're using, or where the problem in the code lies, and they have to open up Ghidra, it's going to take a longer period of time. And one of the powers of the market surveillance authority is to say, we don't believe you until we can prove that you have done everything correctly. Your product is temporarily removed from the market. They will call their friends at Apple. They will call their friends at Google and just say, hey, this guy with this product, well, that product is off the market. Not necessarily everything that the manufacturer has done, but I'm telling you, folks, like, bump up your S-bomb game, because there's more coming. We also have the C-bomb. Like, you might not be aware, but the cryptographic bill of materials is becoming a hard requirement for some government sourcing entities in Europe. I can't talk about the rest of the world, but it's very relevant, especially since, and this is a little minor segue of mine, by 2030, you have to have hybrid cryptography in your product. Hybrid cryptography means both classical and post-quantum. Whether that's Kyber 512, I can't tell you that. It's not my job. By 2035, it can only be quantum resistant. And I'm not going to say quantum secure because other people say it. I won't say that. I don't believe it's a thing. But quantum age cryptography, maybe that's a better word.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's more. There's more. You also have to have a cybersecurity risk assessment completed. So what's a risk assessment entail? Well, how does your product deal with data? How does it deal with remote access? How does it deal with password? What kind of crypto is it using? I mean, products are all different. Even within one product vertical, there's so many topologies. Like, it's hard to make a general purpose diagram for a freaking password manager.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard, and that's one of the simpler products with digital elements that we're working on defining. So you assess the risk. Hopefully somebody smart over at Etsy or Sentinelec had drafted up a vertical together with titans of industry that define exactly what you have to understand and protect, because assessing it includes tests. If you're not aware, it's not just these are the problems. You have to test, and you have to have passing evidence, because every single test, every single assessment for every single criteria of the conformance of your product, we call them requirements, has a pass-fail. And if you fail, here's what's going to happen. The conformity assessment body is going to say, you failed. They're not allowed to tell you what you did wrong. They might tell you that it lies in your secure element. But the thing is, a conformity assessment body is not your consultant. Right. So smart Santas out there, their consultant already set them up with the 9001, is prepping for the module 8, knows which verticals it's going to apply to, and then carry it out with the consultant first. It's like your classical 27001 situation. You have a bunch of gaps, you fill the gaps, you write the documentation, and then you hand it off to the assessor, and the assessor's like, works. Like, check mark, great. Like, but it's not just a check mark exercise, because these conformity assessments really require testing. Like, verify for me that you're using TLS 1.3. Like, maybe looking at the code path works, but you better believe Wireshark's in play. Right? Other tools that the tech community develops. I'm not favoritizing anything right now. I'm just saying that, in the writing of these assessments, that's what you have to do. So if there's no vertical for you to follow, I have a couple of words of advice. Find the one that closely matches your product. Look at the way that the assessments have been created for the requirements that you think you have. Use those as a jumping off point and just document everything you can, because as you asked, like, where does everybody else fit in? There's important and critical. What about Flappy Birds? What about my app, my game on the App Store? Well, that's what is called a default product. And default products do not have standards that apply to them other than generic horizontal standards that say, thou shalt code securely. I mean, important stuff, but it's not going to give you the presumption of conformity. In fact, without a standard, a vertical standard there, you will not have the presumption of conformity. You have to prove it, which is why taking these building blocks is a great way for you to prepare, because what we all sort of expect to happen, and by we all, what I mean is the desk officers over at DG Connect, which is in charge of the standardization process, as well as those of us that have been writing standards for Sentinelec and Etsy, we expect manufacturers to come together and say, hey, we need a standard for memory-safe programming languages. And then write a standard for memory-safe programming languages as a piece of the larger puzzle, so that you can then prove your conformity because you're awesome and you're using Rust or OCaml or something that takes care of memory instead of jockeying C++ like you're a superstar. Um, there are superstars out there. I am unfortunately one of the ones that needs Rust's guardrails, and I never write unsafe because I'm afraid of it. So like the moral of the story is, and we're almost done. Once you've gotten all the stuff put together, then the person in leadership responsible for this product, it could be the CEO, it could be the director of product, it could be the CISO, gets out their pen and puts their name, at least digitally, on the actual declaration of conformity, which is the legal document that you have to have and display to anybody who wants to see it. Now, you might ask yourself, like, okay, but my SBOM changes daily, hourly. Like, I mean, there's a lot of changes in there. How often do I have to update this declaration of conformity? Well, thankfully, only when you introduce a new feature and you've changed the risk assessment. When you add a new feature where there is a new risk associated with your product, that means, for all intents and purposes, you've created a new product. At that point, you have to redeclare conformity. You have to add the new assessments to the previous thing. If it's a conformity assessment body that you used, you have to go back to them. They have to stamp it and sign it and agree to it. And these things take time. Second, like, stocking stuffer for today is this is a gift for product owner, because now you plan feature. There's no more feature creep, because feature creep in some industries means you could add 3 months on to the deployment of this product because it has to go through the compliance process. Whereas if you know the features ahead of time, you can prepare for their existence and prepare for their assessment such that when the feature lands, it's not new, it's always been part of the plan. You just add to the assessment. Now, does the regulator like hearing this? No. But in the default categories, there's no other way to survive, right? What are you going to do? Every 3 months, sign a new declaration of conformity? Thankfully, that only triggers 10 years additional documentation period. It doesn't change the minimum expectancy of the product. The minimum lifetime of virtually all products with digital elements is 5 years. You are required by law to maintain the security of that product for 5 years. This means updates, patches. They don't count toward changing the cybersecurity risk profile unless you're forced to do something different to the architecture, which changes the risk.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So here's something to chew on. Let's pretend you use cryptography in your app, and we're just using, I don't know, Edwards curves. Why not? Because everybody's doing it. They're fun. They're easy to compute. Everybody knows how to do it, more or less. Pretty safe stuff. And suddenly, quantum supremacy arrives, and you're like, uh-oh. Now you have to introduce a new algorithm. I don't know, something to do with letters of quantum, blah, it doesn't matter, but you have to change stuff. Does that change your threat model? Were you ever anticipating attacks from a quantum supreme attacker? If you have a hybrid system in place, or you have what we lovingly, God, I hate it, what we call crypto agility, the ability to go from one algorithm to the next, because sure, why not? But if you've included crypto agility as your mitigation to the risk of future quantum supremacy, then you won't have to redefine your threat model because you've already prepared for it, right? And in that context, I get into a lot of discussions at work about what is and what isn't security theater. In that context, being prepared for the regulatory banhammer by thinking with a security mindset. I don't mean shifting security left. That's BS. I don't know who came up with that. I hate it. Everybody has to start thinking from a security mindset, including the CEO that signs the Declaration of Conformity. Because if it's not, that person is a liar. And if they're a liar, they will get their product removed. They will probably be fired. If they're fired, then they'll get sued, and the company will lose money. Like it just gets sad, and Santa does not want people to be sad. I mean, I would put on my hat if I needed one, but it's summer in Malta, so um,
It's always summer in Malta, Daniel. Okay, so I want to ask, that was I this has been a fire hose, this whole show so far. It's amazing. I love it. But okay, so let's I want to talk about this in the context of Santa, because I think it lets us ask some absurd questions that help clarify some of the interesting points here. So if you are an entity, let's say like, North Pole Incorporated, you're not in
okay,
the European Union, you
right.
have a ridiculous number of products. We're talking about like literally millions of different products, most likely here, right? So all of this documentation, all of this, everything you've just talked about, I need to do this for every single product I have. Yes.
You could do it that way, or you could follow the model. Also, I think proven by Ericsson. They're northern enough where I think there's some crosstalk between North Pole and Ericsson headquarters. Um, they've proven that the Module H approach to verifying the quality of the products of the assembly line is a valid way of manufacturing dozens, hundreds, thousands, in Santa's case, millions of individualized products, because the QMS, it doesn't absolve one of undertaking an assessment. There still has to be an assessment. You probably have to do this on an annual basis to make sure that Santa's assembly lines are still functioning. But that is how you would assign a class of products the the conformity that they're supposed to have for Europe. I mean, does Santa have to do this for India? Not yet. For the little boys and girls in Vermont? Not yet. But Santa is going to say, wait a second. I have to put the silly FCC logo and the CE logo on the battery charger or that I give out with my kids' toys.
Yep. Yep.
So, I mean, I'm not going to just have different assembly lines, one for Europe. No, everything. Look, actually, it makes sense. More security, more good, more happy, more kids to get Christmas presents.
Right. Right. Oh, that's interesting. So you can, if you have lots of products, there are things you can do to alleviate that. That's good, because the thing I had in my brain is a company that has, let's say, like more than 10 products. This would be an absolute nightmare if you had to do it completely separately,
Well,
completely.
I got to be clear here. Like, if one product is a robot that listens to your voice and responds with an answer, and another toy is an electric bicycle that tells you how far you've ridden, those are not the same class of product. Those are very
Okay.
different requirements, right?
Okay. Okay.
So, in that context, if you have a VPN and a browser and a router, you're going to have three different product certifications because they're very clearly different verticals. I'm talking about, we make bicycles, and each bicycle has a battery charger, and all of the bicycles are slightly different, different sizes, different colors, different shapes, and maybe different ways of charging, different screens. But that's a class of products. It's very clearly all similar enough to fall under a quality management system.
Sure. Sure. Okay. So now there's also the angle of Santa isn't charging money for the products. Does that get him off the hook in this context?
Ooh, see, this is a really interesting question because placing on the market.
Ah,
So, I mean,
aha.
so here's the thing. I happen to know from some of my lifelong investing work that Santa also has stocks in Santa merchandise, right? So by promoting the act of charitable giving, Santa is actually recouping on the markets of his valuation. And that means every time you see a Christmas tree with a star on it, Santa's share value goes up. Every time a child's eyes, Josh, every time a child's eyes start to blind because they got the Star Wars Lego kit of Tatooine back in the 80s, his shares went up. And, I think that that's an important question to be asking yourself. Are there reasons other than this product for you to make money? Does this product actually generate you standing? And it's one of those critical points where some consultants might say it one way, others are going to say it another way. And I just say, look, if it's possible for you, if you run a $1 trillion dollar company, do the conformity assessment, right? If you're small, if you're a micro enterprise or an open source project, open source is a totally other situation entirely. Yeah. But even as micro enterprise, you don't face the same level of fines that large enterprises face. I'm not going to name any of them. They know who they are. They're listening right now. They know what's coming after them, and it's millions of euros and percents of global turnover. So it's for some of the FANG persuasion, maybe that's just a drop, but it's still going to be a sizable drop. And I think what you have to ask yourself is this company, first of all, is it a company, right, placing a product on the market for free or for sale, and is it enjoying a profit because of that activity?
I gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Man, that's wild. Now, here's my angle on all of this, and I would love your opinion. I think Santa is one of the greatest criminals in all history. This is an entity that commits countless acts of illegal border crossings, right?
Yeah,
distributes goodness knows what, maybe illegally, to people, be it, I'm sure there's firearms and illicit substances. And so in this case, I could see Santa just saying, like, screw you, Europe. I'm not following your stupid laws. I'm going to do whatever I want. And there's nothing you can do about it. Because let's face it, if Europe was to outlaw Santa, that would be the biggest PR disaster in the history of PR disasters.
So where's the question?
There's no question. That's just my opinion.
I don't disagree with you. I think, if we stick with the whole notion of thievery and illicit, illegal activity in our context of products with digital elements, there's one often misunderstood, misinterpreted, from my opinion, little citation in the MIT open source license that says you got to tell people whose copyright this is and that you're using this library.
Right.
Arguably, not making that declaration as a product manufacturer voids your open source agreement. Right? Like, because you just broke copyright law. You literally did.
Yeah.
If we agree that citation is pivotal, because if I recall, it is the only requirement of the MIT, is that you got to say where you got it from.
So the MIT license, you're thinking it's the 4-clause BSD license that says you have to specify that this particular piece of software is included in your other thing. The MIT license only says you have to include the copyright statement with the software somewhere, not that you have to advertise.
No, that's true. It has,
but you are correct.
Somewhere means it has to be findable.
Right. So 4-clause BSD is the one where you have to say, like, this is, my software, and it includes whatever. right? Some library.
Copyright
Yeah.
Microsoft
And I
2015.
can't wait for all of the open source license nerds to email me and tell me how I screwed that up. But
Hey,
yes,
look,
I get what you're
like
saying.
I'm going out on a limb, and I'm actually claiming that MIT requires the copyright declaration, or you're voiding the agreement you have with the maintainers, the authors, the copyright holders of that code project. Okay, so if we go out on a limb and say you don't have the authority to use this software because you stole it by not declaring copyright, that means that all of the defenses that would belong to open source components of your product are no longer active. That means you, for example, in the product liability directive, it is said that open source component projects are not subject to litigious events. There is a way to read the product liability directive, and I know that some countries are looking squarely over at our friends in Helsinki. There are some that think that, open source means other things than it does. But for the majority of Europe, the product liability directive is going to absolve you if you use open source in your product. If the deficiency is in that open source piece, there is a likelihood that damages will be reduced.
Sure.
Now, the PLD is a no fault liability. It is a type of law that says you put a product in the market, somebody got hurt, it's your fault. Now, these are going to be court cases. There will be court cases. And I just look forward to that event where the manufacturer is like, oh yeah, but this was left pad from Sinvasaurus, right? And then Sinva's like, wait a second, I'm a party to your litigation. Show me where you used where you declared my copyright. And if you can't, then he is definitely not party. And furthermore, you're probably going to get countersued for stealing. I mean, probably. Tinder's not suing anybody. Maybe somebody else might. Maybe the Linux Foundation says, hey, we're collecting all of open source. We're going to put an attestation on there for you, right? Maybe the open source communities, the big boys, the open source software stewards, maybe they say, hey, look, that's not right. We have the pockets to fund litigation against you for stealing open source. I mean, it's a fantasy, but it's Christmas. And I think that's a present I'd like to see. If that comes to play out someday, because somebody listening to this podcast couldn't convince legal to put the copyrights of the open source projects in the SBOM and make that SBOM public, well, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna find some lawyers to talk to about this one, because that's really interesting. That is a wild idea. Okay, all right, Daniel, let's end this one on. I know you said you wanted to give a quick update on the browser work you've been doing at Etsy, and I'll let you plug your book at the very end, and we'll tell people where to get it, because I'm excited to read it. So fill us in on browser work. This sounds exciting.
Well, I found out that GitLab has a limit on lines. I didn't know that, but I had a Markdown. I was writing this all in Markdown. And like it cut off at around page 280 or something like that.
So for the people listening, Daniel just held up a binder he has that has an enormous number of pages. It is a lot. I mean,
in the US, I would definitely call that a solid inch.
It is very large, yeah, which would be 2.54 centimeters for you.
2.54.
We'll say civilized folks.
No, so I'm working on the collation and collection of the vertical standard of the browser for the European Union standardization request placed by European Commission. That standardization request was accepted by two groups, Senelec and Etsy. And as a special rapporteur, my job consists in wrangling the industry stakeholders who are members of Etsy. I'm working at Etsy. Been contracted through Crab Nebula to do this work together with Fukami and Molly, Dream Team. I love it. And what we do is we have a very specific format that the standard has to maintain. And that is we have an introduction where we describe the scope of what is a browser, what is browsing, right? Then we, it really took us a day to figure out what browsing is.
This feels like the mathematical proof for 1 + 1 = 2 is like 360 pages long. Like, I totally get it.
Something like that. After you have the scope, then you have like the formalia of definitions and normative and informative references. And then you kind of go deeper into the definitions of important terms, like, the internet. That's an inside joke. There is no definition of internet that's globally accepted. It's true. The closest I've found is that episode from what's that hacker TV show where they're all in the basement?
TV show in the
Child
basement.
hacker family,
the IT crowd?
IT crowd, yeah. The IT crowd, where they had the internet in a box with a little red light on it. That's about as close as we got. So we just like, okay, let's just define it and move on. And you have these discussions, right? Anyway, clause 4 is all about the informative section of what is the architecture of a browser, what are the security profiles, what does it have that defines the use cases, what are some of the use cases, right? And we use use cases to explain things like, you've built a derivative browser. I'm not saying Edge is derivative. It's not like that. I'm not trying to be mean. This is still Christmas.
No, it is. Like that's a reasonable description.
It's a derivative of the open source Chromium project.
Yeah.
Now, putting together a use case for this type of situation covers a lot of the browsing that happens out there, because you've got WebKit, you got Gecko, you got Chromium or Blink, whatever. You've got these engines. Don't forget about Servo, Daniel. Servo. You've got these open source engines, and then you build something on top of it. Even Chrome is a proprietary project built on top of the open source project. It includes things that they're going to have to then, like, using the subtractive magical process, remove out everything that Chromium did and just use the requirements for what you added on top, right? Updates and passwords and Widevine or whatever it's called. These things that you as a manufacturer put on top of the engine. Anyway, we had a long discussion about all of this stuff until I said, look, we can talk forever about what the optimal architecture of a browser is or isn't, and someone's going to come along and say, hey, you're wrong. And so we moved that into clause 5, and clause 5 describes the requirements. This is the requirements clause. This is a normative clause. Consider it a chapter. It's a decently sized 1/8 of an inch, or 3.5 millimeters, I guess. And what it does is it addresses the range of capabilities that browsers have. And this is where people tend to go astray when they're reading my standard or our standard. I mean, it's not like I wrote most of it, but I kind of did. Our standard, we're writing it together. Like, I'm very thankful for the contributions that we get. But what they get wrong is that we have chosen for a capabilities approach, which means you don't have to go through and answer all 600 requirements if you're only doing an embedded browser. Then you follow the embedded and the system, right? So we have like system level requirements, and then we have kind of use case requirements that are based on the capabilities, right? So, I mean, if I just pick one at random, But I'll do it the proper way. I'll find a requirement, and then we'll pretend it's Christmas, and then we'll go through the capability assessment. Where are we? Here we go. How about, no, we're not going to do logging because that's so boring. Protocol handling. How about that? So the protocol handler is a security mechanism. It has a number of different capabilities within it, but the first one is, hey, I just stopped on custom protocol management. The manufacturer shall securely handle various communication protocols beyond standard HTTP, HTTPS. And the capability is having a support for custom schemes, WebSocket, WebRTC, and emerging web standards. And those are you have as examples, right? Now, with this capability comes conditions of application. So the zero condition, the null condition, as it were, is HTTP, HTTPS only. And then we have standard web protocols with strict validation, custom protocols with registration system, unrestricted protocol handler registration. That's a fun one. So that's protocol 3. Let me go find Pro 3. Pro 3 requirement. Unrestricted protocol registration. I'll just pick one. Pro 3 Rec 11. Browser shall scan custom handlers for known security vulnerability. Juicy.
Nice. I like that one.
Right? So that refs out to ProRec 33. Let me go find which page ProRec 33 is
Okay,
on.
before we fall down this rabbit hole of never-ending references to one another, I mean, this is a crazy amount of work you've put together here, you and the group. Like, that's very cool. Now, let me ask
210.
this.
Come on.
Okay,
Okay.
wrap it up.
I'm sorry. I'll be fast. 210. The assessment ProRec 33. Be fast. Here we go. It's custom handler vulnerability scanning. We have a reference to this. We have a conformant browser. We have a task to verify that the browser scans. We have 6 steps of verification. We have pass criteria, fail criteria, and evidence. So like everything you could imagine as part of a browser goes in there. But wait a second, Daniel, this is something that Chromium solves. I'm not solving this as Edge, right? So basically, those manufacturers that choose to build fully proprietary browsers have a lot of work to do, because open source is not going to, Chromium team, they may, but that's a normative may, not a shall. That means the Chromium team could go through this book and say, yes, we are confident that it meets the expectations of all of these criteria. Here's the evidence. They don't have to. They don't have to. And that's why this browser standard for me is a very interesting interplay of, well, wait a second. Is Safari open source? It isn't. Does the Safari team from Apple want to go through the process of showing their changes from? Or do they just say, look, that's too much work, guys. Let's open source Safari. And hey, that would be another great stocking stuffer, to open source Safari for all of us.
Okay, so let me ask this. This is incredibly complicated, what you just described, this whole situation and universe. Is this how all of the other expert groups are looking, or is the browser expert group unique in that regard?
Look, another one that I know intimately is the boot manager.
Right. Yeah,
Right?
that's you.
So boot managers come in so many wide ranges, arrays of flavors, as do operating systems. I think that the very complex systems that we've kind of grown up with over the past, let's call it 25 years of the 21st century, they tend to have this kind of open source proprietary mashup.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
full product like VPNs, right? Or or password managers. They seem to be like when something is so downstream that it's kind of obvious what you're building. It feels like it's easier to get a clear picture of what's going on. Right?
I see.
Do you know what I mean? Like there's fewer requirements because it's quite obvious, and so from my perspective, the lower the complexity, the higher the chance that you're going to have to go through these hurdles of certification.
That seems fair.
The more complex a product gets, the higher the chance that a lot of the stuff that you're expected to resolve is already covered by your open source component distributors.
Sure. Okay. Oh man, this is way crazier than I expected it to be. Like, man, geez Louise, we've been talking for 50 minutes now, and I feel like I have learned more in the last 50 minutes than I learned in the last like 3 years of reading stuff about this.
Speaking of reading the stuff, I do have a present for one of your listeners. This is my first book in the series. I'm coming out with a new one next spring.
Awesome.
With the first book, Manufacturing European Software. I will personally sign and FedEx this book with some fancy stickers and stuff to one guest that you choose. Obviously, I'm in Europe.
What? I'm not. Yeah, well, you can't put that on
somehow
me.
You have to choose it somehow. I don't want to know it. I don't want to know whose address it is because of the GDPR and stuff.
What? So you're putting that on me?
How am I going to send it? But how am I going to send it? I mean, you're Santa's helper.
What?
So you got to pick.
Oh my goodness. All right, look. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. If you're interested in Daniel's book, there are 2 ways I'll let you get a hold of me. No, there's one. I'm only going to do one because it'll be easier on my life. There is, if you go to opensourcesecurity.io, yeah, that's the website. I didn't think about it. There's a contact me. It's josh@opensourcesecurity.io is my email address. Send me an email. I'll put it all in a spreadsheet. I'm going to pick a random number, and then I'll reply to you and connect you with Daniel and let the 2 of you sort out how on earth you're going to get a book from Malta to wherever it is you live. So do that. And we'll go from there. But oh my goodness. Oh, that's funny. Daniel has a Mac, obviously, because he just gave a thumbs up and now there's fireworks behind him, which will be in the YouTube video. But obviously the audio only folks will miss out on that. And also, I will put a link in the show notes to a ton of the stuff we've talked about. There's a link to Daniel's book he sent me. So if you're interested in acquiring it, we'll say with money, you can do that. But holy crap, man. I was expecting a very silly show that would go off the rails. And I feel like we went off the rails in a different way, it was an incredibly informative and amazing discussion, Daniel. So I want to thank you so much. Holy cow. Like I've got so much to think about and there's so much I probably need to go start working on now. So
well, good luck with that. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy to come back in a few months and give you some new fresh insight.
That's right. And thanks to the Magica Podcast. Merry Christmas, Daniel.
Merry Christmas to you too, Josh.
Yep. Merry Christmas, everyone.